I never thought that opening a single envelope would shatter everything I believed about honor, duty, and the institution I'd spent 23 years serving. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm a retired Army nurse who dedicated most of my adult life to caring for wounded soldiers at Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. I've seen the best and worst of humanity within those hospital walls, but nothing prepared me for what happened to my son, James. It was a cold February morning in 2023 when the official letter arrived at my modest townhouse in Silver Spring. The sky was heavy with clouds that threatened snow, and the wind rattled the windows with an almost prophetic urgency. I was drinking my coffee, still in my robe, when I heard the mail slot clatter. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a cream-colored envelope bearing the Department of Defense seal. My hands trembled as I opened it. James had been gone for 8 months, killed during a mission in Syria that the Army had classified as routine. But mothers know. We always know when something doesn't add up. The nightmares I'd been having, the evasive answers from his commanding officers, the heavily redacted incident report they'd sent me, it all pointed to a truth they didn't want revealed. The letter was brief, cold, and bureaucratic. It stated that after careful review, the Army had determined that Sergeant James Chen would not be receiving the Medal of Honor that his unit had recommended him for. Instead, they were posthumously awarding him a Bronze Star with Valor, still honorable, but not the recognition his actions deserved. The justification was vague, inconsistencies in the after-action reports, and incomplete witness testimonies. I read it 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise. James had saved 7 men. 7. His best friend Marcus Rodriguez had called me from Germany where he was recovering, his voice breaking as he described how James had run into a collapsing building under enemy fire, making 3 separate trips to pull out wounded soldiers before the structure came down on him. Marcus said James had known the risk, had been ordered to fall back, but refused to leave anyone behind. Mrs. Chen, Marcus had sobbed on that call 4 months ago, your son is a hero. They're going to give him the Medal of Honor. He earned it 10 times over. But now, holding this rejection letter, I understood that something had gone terribly wrong. The Army wasn't just denying my son his rightful recognition, they were covering something up. I spent the rest of that day making calls. I contacted Marcus, who was back stateside at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. He was shocked and angry, confirming that he and 3 other survivors had all submitted detailed statements supporting James's Medal of Honor recommendation. I called the Pentagon, getting shuffled between departments, speaking with disinterested administrative assistants who read from scripts and offered nothing but empty condolences. By evening, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by every document I had about James's death. The February darkness came early, and I didn't bother turning on lights. In the dimness, I stared at my son's service photo, his proud smile, his uniform pressed perfectly, his eyes full of the idealism that had driven him to enlist right after high school. I won't let them erase what you did, I whispered to the photograph. I promise you, James. I'll fight this. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Catherine Palmer, another Army mother I'd met at a Gold Star Families gathering the previous year. Her son had also died in combat, and we'd formed a bond through our shared grief. Margaret, I heard, she said without preamble. I have connections with investigative journalists. Would you be willing to talk to them? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Good. Because if the Army is burying your son's story, we need to dig it up, whatever it takes. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James as a little boy, playing with his toy soldiers in our backyard. He'd been so fascinated with military history, so eager to serve his country. I remembered his enlistment ceremony, how straight he'd stood, how seriously he'd taken his oath. The Army had been his life, his purpose, his family, and now that same institution was betraying him. The journalist Catherine connected me with was named Daniel Wright, a veteran reporter for the Washington Post, who'd spent 15 years covering military affairs. We met at a coffee shop in Georgetown on a blustery March morning. Daniel was in his 50s with gray-streaked hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen too many difficult stories. Mrs. Chen, he said, as we sat down with our coffees, I want to be upfront with you. Taking on the Department of Defense is not easy. They have lawyers, they have public relations teams, and they have a vested interest in controlling narratives. Are you prepared for this to get difficult? I looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Wright, I watched soldiers die for 23 years. I held their hands, I wrote letters to their families, and I never once saw the army fail to honor genuine heroism until now. My son deserves the truth. I don't care how difficult it gets." He nodded, respect showing in his expression. "Tell me everything." Over the next 2 hours, I laid out everything I knew. Daniel took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I mentioned the inconsistencies the army cited, he paused. "That's interesting phrasing," he said. "In my experience, when the military uses vague language like that, they're usually hiding something specific, something they don't want examined too closely." "What could they be hiding?" I asked. "That's what we need to find out. I'll need to talk to the survivors, get copies of those statements, and see if I can find anyone willing to speak on record about what really happened that day." Over the following weeks, Daniel worked his sources while I coordinated with Marcus and the other survivors. It wasn't easy. Some were afraid of repercussions, worried that speaking out could damage their careers. But Marcus was fearless, driven by loyalty to his fallen friend. "James would have done this for any of us," Marcus told me during one of our many phone conversations. "I'm not going to let the brass sweep him under the rug because it's politically convenient." By late April, Daniel called me with news. "I found something." One of my Pentagon sources, speaking off the record, told me that James's mission that day wasn't routine. They were protecting a high-value target, a civilian contractor with connections to a classified weapons development program. When the compound came under attack, the evacuation was chaotic. James's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Brennan, ordered a retreat that would have left 3 soldiers behind. My heart pounded. James disobeyed the order. Exactly. He went back in, got those 3 out, then went back for 4 more who'd been pinned down in another section of the building. Brennan was furious. He wanted James court-martialed posthumously for insubordination, but the soldiers James saved made such a stink that the unit commanders recommended him for the Medal of Honor instead. Brennan has been blocking it ever since, using his connections to bury the recommendation. I felt sick. So they're denying my son recognition because he embarrassed a superior officer by doing the right thing? That's what it looks like, but proving it is going to be tricky. Brennan is well connected, and he's got friends in the Pentagon who owe him favors. I stood up from my kitchen chair, anger coursing through me. Then we expose all of it, everything. Daniel's article ran in early May, on the front page of the Washington Post. The headline read, "Army Heroes Medal blocked by officer he defied to save lives." The piece was devastating, detailing not just James's actions, but the systematic cover-up that followed. Marcus and 2 other survivors went on record, describing exactly what happened and confirming that Brennan had ordered them to abandon their fellow soldiers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with outrage. Veterans groups rallied behind James's story. Within 48 hours, 3 members of Congress announced they were demanding an investigation. The hashtag Justice for James Chen trended nationally, but the Army's response was to double down. They issued a statement defending their decision, claiming that all proper protocols were followed and that they stood by their assessment. Brennan himself gave an interview to a military publication, calling the allegations against him categorically false and a coordinated attack on military leadership. I watched that interview in my living room, my hands clenched into fists. Brennan looked so confident, so assured that his rank and connections would protect him. Catherine came over that evening, finding me in tears of frustration. "They're going to win," I said. "They're going to bury this, and James will be forgotten." She sat beside me, taking my hand. "No, Margaret, you've already won something important. The whole country knows what James did now. That can't be taken away, but I understand. You want official recognition. You want them to admit the truth. I want my son to receive the honor he earned," I said firmly. "And I want every soldier in the Army to know that doing the right thing matters more than pleasing corrupt officers." Catherine was quiet for a moment, then said, "There might be another way. It's unconventional, but it would send a powerful message." She told me her idea, and as I listened, I felt something shift inside me, from grief and anger to determination and purpose. Memorial Day weekend arrived with unexpected warmth, the kind of late May weather that makes the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. give way to the lush green of early summer. Arlington National Cemetery was preparing for the annual ceremony, and I had made arrangements to visit James's grave. But this year would be different. Catherine's idea had been bold. If the Army wouldn't give James his Medal of Honor officially, we would hold our own ceremony. We would gather his unit, his friends, his family, and anyone who believed in honoring true heroism, and we would present him with the medal he deserved. It wouldn't be official, of course, but it would be real. It would be the truth. The challenge was getting the actual medal. Catherine had connections with a veterans advocacy group that had commissioned a craftsman to create a replica Medal of Honor, identical in every way to the real thing. It wasn't meant to deceive anyone. It was meant to symbolize what James should have received. Word spread through military and veteran networks. Marcus threw his full support behind the plan, helping to organize James's former unit members. Even some of them still on active duty requested leave to attend, willing to risk their careers to honor their fallen brother. The Pentagon got wind of our plans, of course. In early May, I received a phone call from a colonel in the Army's Public Affairs Office. "Mrs. Chen," he said in a practiced diplomatic tone, "we understand you're planning an unauthorized ceremony at Arlington. I need to inform you that this could be considered a violation of military protocol and potentially defamatory to the service." "Are you threatening me, Colonel?" I asked calmly. "I'm advising you, ma'am. The Army has made its decision regarding your son's commendations. Hosting a mock ceremony could be seen as disrespectful to the actual recipients of the Medal of Honor." "What's disrespectful?" I replied, my voice hardening, "is letting political games and personal vendettas determine who gets recognized for valor. My son saved 7 lives. Your organization is too busy protecting a toxic officer to acknowledge that. So with all due respect, Colonel, I'll see you at Arlington." I hung up before he could respond. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I sat in James's old room, which I'd kept exactly as he'd left it before his last deployment. His bookshelf still held his collection of military history books, his desk still had photos of his unit, and his army uniform hung in the closet. I took the uniform out, running my fingers over the fabric. Tomorrow, I would wear my own military dress uniform for the first time since my retirement. Tomorrow, I would stand at my son's grave and give him what his country had failed to provide. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Everything's ready, Mrs. Chen. At least 50 soldiers will be there. We're bringing the honor James deserves." Tears blurred my vision as I typed back, "Thank you for everything." Another message came in, this one from Daniel Wright. "Military Times and several news outlets will be there tomorrow. The Army tried to pressure them not to cover it, but the story's too big now. Whatever happens, the world will see it." I set my phone down and looked at James's photo on the nightstand, the one from his last leave, where we'd gone hiking in Shenandoah National Park. He was smiling, his arm around my shoulders, looking so alive and full of hope. "Tomorrow, baby," I whispered. "Tomorrow we set things right." Memorial Day morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive, even as you mourn those who aren't. I arrived at Arlington National Cemetery at 9 o'clock, 2 hours before our planned ceremony. The grounds were already filling with visitors, families moving between white headstones with flowers and small American flags. James's grave was in Section 60, where many casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan are buried. As I walked the familiar path, I saw that others had already arrived. Marcus stood at attention beside the headstone, wearing his dress uniform. Next to him were the 7 men James had saved, all of them in uniform, all of them with tears in their eyes. When Marcus saw me, he saluted. "Mrs. Chen, we're ready to honor Sergeant Chen properly." More people kept arriving, former members of James's unit, soldiers from other branches who'd heard the story and wanted to show support, veterans from previous wars, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs, all of them understanding what this moment meant, families of other fallen soldiers, Gold Star mothers and fathers and siblings who knew the pain of loss and the added cruelty of bureaucratic betrayal. By 11 o'clock, over 200 people had gathered. The crowd extended well beyond James's grave, filling the surrounding area. News cameras were set up at a respectful distance, and I could see journalists with notebooks scattered throughout the crowd. I also noticed several uniformed military personnel who I suspected had been sent by the Pentagon to monitor the situation. Let them watch, I thought. Let them report back what real honor looks like. Catherine stood beside me, holding a wooden box that contained the replica Medal of Honor. She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Are you ready?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Marcus stepped forward to address the crowd. His voice was strong despite the emotion in it. "We're here today because the Army failed one of its best. Sergeant James Chen died doing what every soldier is trained to do, leaving no one behind. He ran into a collapsing building 3 times under enemy fire. He saved 7 lives, including mine. And when his commanding officer ordered us to abandon our brothers, James said no. He chose honor over obedience. He chose lives over his own safety, and for that he's being punished even in death. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Marcus continued, "The army says he doesn't deserve the Medal of Honor. They say there were inconsistencies. But every man he saved is standing here today to tell you there's no inconsistency in heroism. There's no inconsistency in courage. James Chen earned this medal, and today we're making sure he receives it." The crowd erupted in applause. I saw several soldiers openly crying, and even some of the journalists looked emotional. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, my hands shaking, as I took the box from Catherine. The Medal of Honor replica gleamed in the sunlight. Blue ribbon, gold star, an angel representing valor. I knelt at James's headstone, my dress uniform crisp against my body, and I spoke to my son for everyone to hear. "James, I taught you a lot of things in your life. I taught you to be kind, to work hard, to stand up for what's right. But you taught me something too, especially in your death. You taught me that real courage isn't following orders blindly. It's knowing when the orders are wrong and having the strength to do better. You taught me that one person's choice can save 7 lives, 7 families from the grief I carry every day." My vision blurred with tears, but I continued. "The army won't give you this medal, son. They're too worried about protecting someone's reputation, too concerned with politics and protocol. But I'm your mother, and I know what you did. These men know what you did, and now the whole world knows what you did." I opened the box and carefully removed the Medal of Honor. The crowd had gone completely silent. "By the authority of a mother's love, by the witness of the men whose lives you saved, and by the judgment of everyone here who understands true valor, I present you with the Medal of Honor." I pinned the medal to the small memorial wreath that Marcus had placed against James's headstone. My hands were steady now, each movement deliberate and full of purpose. "You are a hero, James Chen. You will always be a hero. And no bureaucrat, no corrupt officer, no official denial can ever take that away from you." I stood, saluted my son's grave, and stepped back. Then something happened that I hadn't planned, something that made my heart nearly burst. One by one, every soldier in the crowd came to attention and saluted. The 7 men James had saved stood in a line, their salutes held for a long, solemn moment. Then Marcus began singing, softly at first, then louder, the battle hymn of the Republic. Others joined in, voices rising in the morning air. The song echoed across the cemetery, carrying over the graves of thousands of fallen soldiers. It was defiant and mournful and proud all at once. When the song ended, people began approaching James's grave to pay their respects. They laid flowers, they touched the headstone, they thanked him. An elderly World War II veteran in a wheelchair rolled up, tears streaming down his face, and placed his own service medals beside the Medal of Honor we'd pinned there. "Semper Fi, son," the old Marine whispered. "You done good." The ceremony lasted for hours as people came and went. News cameras captured it all. By evening, footage of me pinning the medal on my son's memorial was trending online, viewed millions of times. The hashtag #ShoreRealHonor was everywhere. 3 days later, the Secretary of Defense announced a full investigation into James's case and into Lieutenant Colonel Brennan's conduct. 2 weeks after that, Brennan was quietly reassigned to a desk job pending the investigation's outcome. And exactly 2 months after our ceremony at Arlington, on a humid July morning, I received another official letter from the Department of the Army. This one was different. It informed me that after additional review and consideration of new testimony, Sergeant James Chen was being posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. An official ceremony would be held at the White House in September. I sat in my kitchen, reading the letter through tears of relief and vindication, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. The fight had taken everything I had, and in the end, I'd won. But James was still gone. Marcus called me as soon as he heard the news. "We did it, Mrs. Chen. James is getting his medal." "No," I corrected him gently. "James already had his medal. We just made them admit it." The official White House ceremony was impressive. The President, the Secretary of Defense, military brass from all branches, and James's entire unit in attendance. They presented me with the real Medal of Honor, and the President gave a speech about courage and sacrifice. But as I held that official medal in my hands, I thought about the replica still pinned to the memorial wreath at Arlington. That was the one that mattered. That was the one given with pure love and untainted truth. After the ceremony, I returned to Arlington alone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the white headstones. I knelt at James's grave one more time. "I kept my promise," I said simply. "The truth won." As I stood to leave, I noticed something. Other families had begun leaving replicas of medals and commendations at graves throughout Section 60, symbols of recognition for soldiers they felt had been overlooked or undervalued. Our act of defiance had inspired something larger. I walked back through the cemetery as twilight deepened, past row after row of those who'd given everything for their country. And I understood then that James's legacy wasn't just about one medal or one fight against bureaucracy. It was about reminding everyone that honor isn't given by institutions. It's earned through actions, witnessed by those who were there, and preserved by those who refused to forget. The army had rejected my son's medal, so I pinned it on him myself, at his grave, surrounded by those who knew the truth. And in doing so, I'd honored not just James, but every soldier whose heroism had ever been buried beneath politics and pride. That, I realized, was worth everything.